Let's try this again. Name and what you're doing here at 1:40 in the morning.
I already told you. Adele Kingston, Special Agent in Charge, FBI. I'm off duty and checking in for a conference.
Yeah, and I'm the mayor. That's supposed to impress me?
It's meant to inform you you're out of line. This is my credential.
Dean, badge looks real. Looks printed to me.
Your body cams are rolling. Keep it.
Ma'am, keep your hands where I can see them. Officer Dean Harlow's voice slices through the small hotel room as his body cam light locks onto a tired black woman sitting on the edge of her bed. A woman he's already treating like a suspect, unaware she's a high-ranking FBI official off duty and currently on leave for personal reasons. She tries to explain. He doesn't listen. And as the camera keeps recording every unnecessary command, he has no idea this footage, this exact moment, will end his career, shut down a hotel, and eventually cost the department over $1 million in settlement and damages, all because he chose bias over judgment on the wrong woman. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The red recording dot in the top corner of Officer Ezra Bowman's bodycam blinked steadily. Reflecting off the hotel's pale beige walls, Adele Kingston sat completely still, her palms open, her breathing controlled. She wasn't confused about what she was being asked. She was confused about why it was happening at all. Moments ago, she had been settling into her room at the Ridgewood Summit Hotel, hoping to rest after a long week. She was on official leave from the FBI, taking a much-needed break to handle family matters after her aunt's recent passing. Now 2 officers stood in front of her like she was a threat. Harlow stepped farther inside, boots thumping against the thin carpet. Bowman lingered near the doorway, clearly uneasy, though his expression stayed neutral. Adele caught his eyes for a moment. He looked unsure, but not aggressive. Harlow, on the other hand, had already decided something was wrong the moment she opened the door. "Suspicious call," Harlow said flatly. "Woman with a lot of cash. Matches your description. You want to tell us what you're really doing here tonight?" Adele kept her voice even. "I checked into my room. That's it." Bowman let out a quiet, sarcastic laugh. "Yeah, sure. Just checking in, at this hour, with that amount of money." Adele didn't react. She had gone to the bank earlier that day to withdraw part of the inheritance her aunt left behind. Cash she planned to distribute to relatives who didn't have bank accounts. It wasn't unusual. It wasn't suspicious. It was personal, and none of it should have been any concern to the hotel staff or the police. She inhaled slowly. She wasn't easily intimidated. At 39, with decades of field and operational experience behind her, she had faced real criminals, real danger, but she never expected to be treated like this while simply trying to rest. "It's my money," Adele said, "and I'm on leave. There's nothing suspicious about that." Harlow's eyes sharpened. Almost offended, she dared to speak confidently. Off duty doing what exactly? The question wasn't genuine curiosity. It was accusation. Bowman shifted, arms crossing tighter, watching her with the same narrowed suspicion. But this moment didn't begin here. It began downstairs. Hours earlier, Marianne Colebrook, the night clerk at the Ridgewood Summit Hotel, had watched Adele approach the counter. Marianne was known among staff for her nervousness and something else. A pattern. A quiet but undeniable history of profiling guests, especially black ones. She had a reputation for treating them as suspicious, no matter how ordinary the situation was. Colleagues had complained, managers had cautioned her, but nothing ever changed. So when Adele opened her wallet, Marianne's eyes didn't just go to the cash. They went straight to the fact that a black woman was holding it. And that was enough for her to lose composure. Instead of processing Adele's payment and continuing her shift, she froze, judged, assumed the worst instantly, the same way she always did whenever a black guest checked in with something she considered out of place. By the time Adele stepped into the elevator, Marianne had convinced herself something illegal was happening, even though Adele had done nothing unusual. Moments later, she grabbed the phone and dialed 911. Adding yet another incident to her growing list of biased reports. And when Harlow and Bowman walked into the lobby, they didn't question her story. They didn't ask for evidence. They didn't ask why she thought a black woman with cash must be committing a crime. They just accepted it. Eagerly. "What room?" Harlow asked. 514, Marianne whispered. Bowman muttered, "Figures." Back in the room, Adele felt the temperature shift as the officers circled around their assumptions. People don't just walk around with stacks of cash unless they're into something, Harlow said. And your answers? A little too neat. Adele looked between them. Their posture, their tone, their expressions, none of this came from protocol. It came from bias. I answered your questions, she said calmly. Again, I'd like to know why I'm being treated like a suspect. Harlow smirked. Let's not play innocent. You know exactly why someone would call the police over what you're doing. Bowman added, Yeah, we've seen this before. Adele's jaw tightened. She kept her voice steady. There is nothing illegal about paying cash. Stand up, Harlow ordered suddenly. Adele didn't move yet, not out of defiance, but disbelief. For what reason? Harlow stepped closer. Because I told you to, unless you want non-compliance added to your night. Bowman angled himself toward the doorway, ready to block her. Adele rose slowly. She knew where this was heading. She'd read cases like this, investigated cases like this. Turn around, Harlow said. Bowman's camera kept blinking, catching every second, and the moment hung in the air, charged, unfair, and seconds away from crossing a line both officers would soon regret. Turn around, Harlow said. She did, slowly, feeling both officers' eyes burning into her back as the body cam continued to blink red in the corner of her vision. The room felt smaller now, the air heavier. Adele kept her breathing steady, but she could already sense where this was heading. She had trained officers to avoid exactly this kind of escalation, and now she was standing in the center of it. Harlow stepped closer, the metal clink of handcuffs sounding before she even saw them. Hands behind your back, he ordered. For what legal reason? Adele asked without raising her voice. Bowman didn't answer, but his body shifted uneasily. He wasn't stepping in, he never would. But even he knew this wasn't protocol. Still, he stayed in character, keeping that same cold stare, that same judgment, the same bias that had been sitting on his face since the moment he saw her. Harlow didn't hesitate. He snapped the cuffs onto her wrists with force he didn't need to use. Detaining you for further questioning, he said. Suspicious behavior. Inconsistent answers. Her answers weren't inconsistent. His assumptions were. The cuffs tightened, metal biting into her skin. Adele kept her posture straight, refusing to give either of them the satisfaction of seeing discomfort. Bowman angled the camera downward slightly, catching her wrists, catching Harlow's grip, catching the way he pushed her forward a bit harder than necessary. No attempt to hide the hostility, no attempt to treat her like anything other than a problem. Let's move, Harlow said. We're done talking here. Adele glanced over her shoulder. You're making a serious mistake. Bowman muttered under his breath. Yeah, they all say that. She caught that comment. She stored it. Another piece of evidence. They guided her out into the hallway, or rather, Harlow dragged, while Bowman stayed behind enough to angle the camera, but close enough to ensure she didn't shift an inch without them noticing. Not that she planned to. Compliance wasn't the issue. Their prejudice was. The corridor was quiet, the patterned carpet swallowing most sounds except the officer's boots and the handcuffs lightly clinking with each step. Adele didn't resist. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't panic. She knew that staying calm would expose them more clearly than anything she could say. Harlow, annoyed by her silence, filled it with more talking. You know, people like you always act calm until we get to the truth. People like you. He didn't explain what that meant. He didn't have to. Bowman added, Yeah, they act all professional, but we know the type. Adele looked ahead, jaw tight, saying nothing. Every word they spoke, every assumption was being recorded. They reached the elevator. Harlow pressed the button with unnecessary force. When the doors slid open, he pushed her inside first, guiding her with a hand on her arm even though she was already cooperating. Bowman stepped in after them, positioning himself so she was boxed in between both officers. The elevator doors closed. The tension rose. Harlow leaned slightly against the wall, watching her like someone waiting for a confession. So why the cash? You running something tonight? Adele lifted her eyes. I already told you. It's personal. Bowman gave a short laugh. Personal. Right? You expect us to believe that? I expect you to follow procedure, she said calmly. Harlow scoffed. Procedure? Lady, we were called to check out suspicious activity. We're doing our job. No, Adele said. You're acting on bias. Both officers stiffened for half a second. It wasn't outrage, it was recognition. Not that they'd admit it. Harlow stepped closer. Let me tell you something. Every time we get called about someone paying cash at this hour, it's never someone with a clean story. So don't try to play innocent. Bowman nodded. Exactly. You fit what we see all the time. Adele met their eyes one by one. You see what you want to see. The elevator dinged. The doors opened. Harlow grabbed her arm again and guided her toward the back entrance where the patrol car waited. Bowman followed, still filming, still silent, still complicit. Outside, the cold air hit her face. The parking lot was mostly empty, dim streetlights casting long shadows along the pavement. Harlow opened the back door of the cruiser with a sharp tug. "In you go," he said. Adele paused for half a second, not resisting, just looking at him, memorizing his face, his posture, his arrogance. "You're detaining the wrong person." Harlow rolled his eyes. "Yeah, I doubt that." Bowman smirked. "Bet she'll have a completely different story once we get her inside." Adele didn't respond. She sat down in the cruiser, the cuffs pressing against her wrists as Harlow shut the door behind her. Through the glass, she could see him shaking his head as if he'd already solved the case. He hadn't. He had just created one. Bowman walked around to the passenger side, adjusting the camera so it clearly captured Adele in the back seat, tired, restrained, and entirely compliant. Harlow got into the driver's seat, muttering something about another late-night liar before starting the engine. As they pulled away from the hotel, Adele watched the building fade behind them. Marianne Colebrook would be inside right now, fully believing she'd done the right thing. Harlow and Bowman would be thinking they were heading towards some kind of breakthrough. None of them knew the truth. They weren't taking Adele Kingston in for questioning. They were driving straight into an internal investigation that would unravel both of their careers, all because bias had replaced judgment long before the handcuffs ever clicked. The patrol car rolled through the quiet streets of Stanton Hill. Adele sat in the back seat, her wrists cuffed, her shoulder pressed against the cold door. Harlow drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting casually near his radio as if this were just another late-night stop. Bowman sat stiffly in the passenger seat, glancing back at her every few seconds, not out of concern, but out of suspicion he hadn't earned. Neither man spoke to her. They didn't need to. Their silence carried the same judgment their words had. Adele stared out the window, repeating one sentence in her mind: follow procedure. Stay calm. Let the evidence speak later. She had handled cartel takedowns, fraud rings, high-risk extractions. She could handle 2 biased officers on a power trip. But she also knew every passing second of this detainment was becoming fuel. Fuel for an investigation they didn't know they were building against themselves. Harlow broke the silence first. "You know, Bowman, I'm betting she tries the whole 'I work for some government agency' story once we get her inside." Bowman chuckled. "Yeah, they always pull that card when they get caught." Adele looked straight ahead. "I don't lie about my work." Harlow shook his head, unimpressed. "Save it. You can explain everything at the station. Maybe someone there will buy it." They didn't know someone at the station certainly would, just not in the way they imagined. The cruiser pulled into the back lot of the Stanton Hill Police Department. Harlow parked sharply, the tires scraping against gravel. He got out first, slamming the door harder than necessary. Bowman came around to open the back door, his body cam angled directly at Adele's face, as if waiting for her to break. She didn't. He grabbed her arm with a little more pressure than protocol required and guided her out. "Watch your step," he said flatly, though his tone made it clear he didn't actually care. Harlow led the way through the side entrance, swiping his card, pushing through doors that echoed down the hallway. Adele followed between them, silent, measured. Officers at desks looked up briefly before returning to their screens, unaware of who was walking past them or how fast the situation was about to change. They brought her into a small processing room, grey walls, overhead fluorescent lighting buzzing faintly. Harlow motioned for her to sit. Adele didn't move yet. "I'd like to make my phone call." Harlow scoffed. "Later. You don't get to just—" She cut him off, calm and controlled. "It's my right." Bowman shifted uncomfortably. Even he knew that part wasn't up for debate. Harlow hesitated, annoyed, but eventually jerked his chin toward the desk phone. "Fine. One call. Make it quick." Adele stepped toward the phone, cuffs still on, forcing her to angle awkwardly. Harlow didn't bother to loosen them. Bowman adjusted his camera again, making sure the recording continued. Adele dialed. 1 ring, 2, Then a voice answered, steady, authoritative, familiar. "This is Director Langston." Bowman's eyes flicked toward Harlow. Adele spoke clearly. "It's Kingston. I've been detained." The silence on the other end was immediate, deep, weighted, dangerous. "Where?" Director Langston asked. "Stanton Hill Police Department," she replied. "No probable cause, no evidence. Bias-driven call from a hotel clerk. 2 officers escalated." Bowman's face drained slightly. Harlow's jaw tightened. "I'll handle it," Director Langston said. A pause. "Stay exactly where you are." The call ended. Adele set the phone down and turned to face both officers. Bowman swallowed hard. "Director? Director of what?" Harlow's voice cracked before he steadied it. "She's bluffing." But he didn't believe that. Not really. His confidence flickered, replaced by something he hadn't shown all night. Doubt. Adele simply said, "You'll find out soon." Minutes passed, not many, but enough for Harlow to pace, enough for Bowman to shift nervously, enough for the tension to thicken every second the phone didn't ring, until it did. The front desk line lit up. Someone answered, then immediately stood straighter, voice shaky. Captain, you need to take this." Not long after, the door to the processing room burst open. Captain Rourke walked in, hair disheveled like he'd gotten out of bed faster than he could think. His eyes swept the scene. Adele in cuffs, the officers flanking her, and his face dropped. "Harlow, Bowman, outside. Now." Bowman obeyed instantly. Harlow hesitated, then followed, jaw clenched. The captain shut the door behind them, but his voice exploded through the hallway. "You detained WHO? Without what?" A pause. A muffled explanation. Then, louder, "She's the head of FBI strategic operations. She outranks everyone in this building." Footsteps, papers slamming, someone cussing under their breath. Adele heard every word. Inside the room, she stayed seated, composed, watching the body cam light blink through the glass window where Bowman paced outside. He kept glancing at the camera on his chest like it had betrayed him. Harlow's voice rose next. "She wasn't honest. She didn't have to be," Captain Rourke snapped. "Your job is evidence, not assumptions. And you," another pause, "you let this happen? Both of you?" Bowman didn't answer. His silence was guilt enough. The door finally opened again. Captain Rourke stepped inside, face tight with embarrassment and fury. "Miss Kingston," he said, "your cuffs are coming off right now." Harlow re-entered the room to unlock them, but his hands shook. Adele didn't look at him. She didn't need to. Everything that mattered was already recorded. Every comment, every tone, every assumption. As the metal released from her wrists, the weight of what was coming settled heavily onto both officers. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was the start of a federal-level investigation, one that would dismantle careers, expose bias, and put the Ridgewood Summit Hotel under the harshest spotlight it had ever seen. As the cuffs fell away from Adele's wrists with a metallic click that echoed louder than anything else in the room, Officer Harlow stepped back quickly, almost as if touching her any longer might burn him. Bowman kept staring at the floor, his body cam still blinking, still capturing every second of their unraveling. Captain Rourke cleared his throat, trying and failing to steady his voice. "Miss Kingston, I've already notified your office. A full report will be conducted immediately. You shouldn't have been detained at all." Adele nodded once. She wasn't interested in apologies. Not tonight, not from this room. She had seen enough to know how deep the problem ran. Not just 2 officers acting on bias, but a system that allowed them to act this way without fear until they picked the wrong target. Rourke motioned toward the door. "If you'd like, we can have someone escort you home." Adele didn't move. "No, I'll wait." He hesitated, unsure what she meant, until the hallway erupted again. Multiple voices, multiple footsteps. Then the door opened and 2 federal supervisors stepped inside, their expressions carved from stone. Director Langston followed them, his suit still perfect despite being called out of bed in the middle of the night. His presence alone shifted the entire atmosphere. "Adele," he said quietly, "are you all right?" "I'm fine physically," she replied, "but what happened here is unacceptable." His jaw tightened. "We agree." Harlow and Bowman stood rigidly near the wall as Langston turned toward them. The officers avoided eye contact, but it didn't matter. Every mistake they made tonight, every racist assumption, every unlawful order, every ounce of bias, was sitting in the room with them, replaying in the corner of Bowman's body cam like a silent witness they couldn't silence. Langston folded his arms. "I've reviewed the initial report and been briefed on the call. What I want to know is simple. On what grounds did you detain her? Harlow opened his mouth. Suspicious behaviour. A hotel clerk reported. A hotel clerk reported cash, Langston cut in sharply, which is not illegal. Neither is being black in a lobby after midnight. Try again. Bowman swallowed hard. She fit the description Marianne gave. Langston's eyes narrowed. And that description was what? Existing? Silence. Captain Rourke cleared his throat again, but this time he wasn't in control. He was just present while something bigger rolled over his department. Director, he said, I've already placed both officers on immediate administrative leave. No, Langston said, turning toward him, not administrative leave, suspended, effective now. Harlow stiffened. Bowman's shoulders collapsed. Langston wasn't finished. And their body cam footage, he continued, is now federal evidence. Do not alter it. Do not delete it. Do not touch it unless instructed. Understood? Both officers mumbled a weak, yes, sir. Adele remained seated, letting every word sink into the room, into the carpet, into the walls of the station that had allowed this injustice to happen. By morning, the story had already moved beyond the station. Federal officials arrived in unmarked cars, requesting files, logs, incident reports, and a full breakdown of the 911 call that started everything. The recording of Marianne Colebrook's call was pulled and examined. Suspicious black woman, large amount of cash, could be criminal activity. Not one factual claim. Not one sign of wrongdoing, just fear wrapped in bias. And once the footage from Bowman's camera was synced with the timeline, Adele answering politely, Harlow pressing her, both officers making racially loaded comments, the unlawful cuffing. The pattern was undeniable. A report was drafted before noon. Officer Dean Harlow violated detention protocol, acted without probable cause, displayed clear racial bias, used unnecessary physical pressure, failed to ask clarifying questions, ignored procedural steps for suspicious activity calls. He was terminated within 48 hours. Officer Ezra Bowman encouraged bias through his comments, failed to intervene, escalated tension with dismissive behavior. He received a 6-month suspension, mandatory retraining, and a formal reprimand added to his file, a mark that would follow him for the rest of his career. But the consequences didn't stop with them. The Ridgewood Summit Hotel was contacted by state licensing authorities. Marianne Colebrook, the clerk who made the biased 911 call, was interviewed. When asked why she thought Adele was suspicious, her answers unravelled. I don't know. She just had a lot of cash. It didn't seem right. She looked nervous. But she wasn't nervous. She was exhausted. And Marianne's assumptions had caused the entire disaster. The state board cited the hotel for failure to train staff on discrimination, improper use of emergency services, negligence leading to unlawful detainment of a federal official. A 6-figure fine followed. Then, the worst blow. Their operating license was suspended pending further review. The Ridgewood Summit Hotel closed within the month, and shortly after, the hotel's insurance and legal team quietly settled with Adele for $1 million, a payout meant to close the case quickly, though it did nothing to erase the embarrassment now tied to their name. One call had collapsed an entire business. A few days after everything settled, Adele agreed to one internal statement, not public, not televised. I don't want apologies, she said. I want accountability, and I want this recorded clearly. Bias is not a misunderstanding, it is a choice, and choices have consequences. She returned to her work shortly afterward, overseeing operations with the same calm confidence she had in that hotel room, unshaken by intimidation, unmoved by bias. But the lesson stayed behind. This wasn't just a bad night. It wasn't just a mistaken call. It wasn't just 2 officers overstepping. It was a chain of assumptions, 1 clerk, 2 officers, 0 evidence, that led to the wrongful detainment of one of the highest-ranking law enforcement officials in the region. And the camera caught everything. Every assumption, every comment, every moment of bias disguised as procedure. In the end, the people who thought they were catching a criminal instead exposed themselves. If you found this story important, don't leave without hitting subscribe. And tell me in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. This is Voices Unchained, and we'll be back tomorrow with another story the world needs to hear.